The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the America 250 State and Territory Officials Listening Session. I am Frank Giordano, the Executive Director of the United States Semiquincentennial Commission. It is my honor and a privilege to welcome you to this important conversation. The Commission envisions America's 250 as the largest and most inclusive celebration and commemoration in our nation's history, with the potential to inspire the American spirit, engage nearly 350 million Americans, produce more than 100,000 programs, attract billions in resources, and build to a peak in 2026. America 250's purpose statement provides inspiration and direction to this big opportunity. This purpose, along with the other elements of the Commission's visionary framework, emerged with remarkable consistency from the Commission's strategic planning process and was strongly validated by a stratified survey of more than 5,000 Americans. Inspiring the American spirit captures the purpose of America 250 in a nutshell. Embracing that spirit with all Americans and each American signals our commitment to be broadly inclusive of our nation's many diverse communities and to have a deep impact on individuals. America's spirit is grounded in its founding principles that are the bedrock of our nation and this 250th anniversary. America 250 aims to provide inspiration for our continuing journey to align the American experience with the promise of those principles to form a more perfect union that secures liberty and justice for all. The Commission believes America is on an extraordinary journey, well worth celebrating and commemorating, and invites your ideas and active participation. At the core of the America 250 vision are three themes or goals: educate, engage, and unite, which, if achieved, will contribute to the fulfillment of America 250's purpose. Represented here by the questions that conclude the description of each theme, they are perhaps best understood as prompts for participation to spark creative expression in tens of thousands of programs. Today, we are going to explore how we can leverage America 250 to promote each state and territory's unique contributions to America, drive economic activity, and increase community engagement. Our hour will go quickly. After my brief welcome, Brian Martin from the America 250 Foundation staff will briefly introduce the Commission's emerging approach to involving states and territories in America 250. We will spend most of our time in a conversation with a distinguished panel drawn from a cross-section of state and territory officials, facilitated by Tony Rucci, the president of the America 250 Foundation. Thank you for participating in today's listening session. We look forward to your questions, insight, and feedback.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Martin, the Director of Program Coordination and Outreach for the America 250 Foundation. I'll begin this brief introduction with some logistics to guide our time and then highlight several key items to provide a common foundation for our conversation today. Understanding a few operational details will help you have the best webinar experience possible. Panelists will be seen and heard by everyone. Registered attendees cannot share their camera or audio, but we encourage your questions, comments, and feedback through the question box in the control panel. Our moderator will monitor this feed throughout the session. One or two attendee questions may be elevated into the live conversation, but all will be addressed and shared with all attendees and panelists afterward. You will have an opportunity to provide additional feedback through the post-webinar survey. We also encourage you to view and download the handouts from the control panel, which include pictures and brief biographies of the panelists to help you follow who is speaking, a page of technical tips for attendees, and a copy of the slide deck. Just as a note, this session is being recorded and may be released. In addition to the purpose and themes Frank just mentioned, the Commission developed 4 guidelines to clarify the scope of America 250 for those developing programs. These guidelines send a clear message to each state and territory that it will play an essential role in America 250. No doubt America 250 will draw inspiration from and attention to the history of the Revolutionary Era. But America's story did not begin or end with the Revolution. It is a rich tapestry woven with threads originating in all our states and territories. Geographically, America 250 will no doubt draw attention to the 13 original states, but the commemoration must encompass each and every state and territory. America 250 is not just a moment 6 years in the future. Rather, it is a commemorative season that has already begun and will run through 2027 and in some states beyond. America 250 is not just about reflection on the past, but also invites engagement in the present and pursuit of the future. America 250 presents a monumental opportunity for each state and territory to, 1, promote its unique contributions, attractions, and prospects to elevate its distinct identity within the Union. 2, advance its economic interests and drive economic activity. And 3, encourage community engagement with its significant role in America's past, present, and future. To realize the America 250 vision, the Commission intends to facilitate a largely decentralized America 250 that is of, by, and for the people. Its approach is to create an architecture of participatory frameworks through which interested parties can shape their programs. While the Commission will develop national signature programs and support national partnership programs, pictured in the dark blue arrows, the vast majority of programming will grow out of grassroots ideas and be administered through the 4 broad jurisdictional frameworks represented by the light blue arrows. Of these 4, the state, territory, and local framework is the most significant, likely to administer an estimated 78,000 to 121,000 programs over the next 6 years. To support state and territory participation on this scale, the Commission anticipates sharing the America 250 brand, customized to highlight each state and territory's distinct identity, systems for program development, administration, and promotion, and last but certainly not least, resources coordinated from both public and private sources. To receive this support, the Commission encourages states and territories to establish official America 250 organizations, which at a minimum have exclusive authority to represent your state and territory in dealings with the Commission or Foundation. The authority and capacity to receive and distribute funds from state, federal, or private sources. And finally, the authority and capacity to coordinate America 250 initiatives developed by that state or territorial organization, as well as programs undertaken by local governments and private organizations or individuals. America 250 presents a remarkable once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all Americans and each American from every state and territory. Thank you.
So hello again. My name is Tony Rucci. I'm the president and CEO of the America 250 Foundation. I was also very involved in the development of the strategic plan for the Commission during 2019. First of all, let me add my welcome to our distinguished panelists, as well as all of the attendees that have called in this afternoon. Thank you so much for doing this. These listening sessions are absolutely crucial to a successful effort to celebrate and communicate America's 250th anniversary. We believe that the only way to develop a resonatable kind of a program of events and programs is to include the voice of as many Americans as possible. We want to engage not just all 330 million Americans, but each American. And the only way to do that is to allow the opportunity for each American to not only provide input to the design of these programs and events, but to also then participate in those events. We have already heard directly from well over 6,500 Americans individually about their thoughts about the programs and events, what they would emphasize in any programs and events, and that's just scratching the surface. Our website, america250.org, is recently installed, and we hope to attract tens of thousands of people's ideas and input to our website over the next few years. The other reason why these listening sessions and state participation is so critical, the commission will likely sponsor a dozen or so national signature events, and a number of the federal agencies will also sponsor their national federal events. But the vast majority of those 100,000 events that Brian referenced earlier are going to happen at the state and local community level. And that's why discussions like this are going to be so crucial to our success. Our panelists today, we've attracted 11 very distinguished folks who are in various roles in states and related nonprofits. They accepted our invitation to graciously do this. We can't introduce them individually in the interest of time, but I would point you to the bios that were included in the information you received so that you can learn more about these people. And in most cases, they have their contact information on their bio so that you can contact them directly. The other thing I would point out is while attendees are not going to be able to interrupt the audio with questions, for those of you who have this on your screen, Brian referred to it earlier, on the far right is a control panel. And what you can see is there are dark gray bars with labels on them. One of them, halfway down the panel, is labeled questions. All you need to do to address a question generally or to one of the specific panel members is to click on the questions box and go ahead and enter your question. We are going to be monitoring, tracking the questions that you ask. We may pose some in real time to the panelists, and or if time allows at the end, we'll come back and pick up a couple of the more frequently asked questions. So how are we going to do this? We've identified a series of questions beforehand. We have 3 questions regarding what we believe are the opportunities presented by America 250 to each of the states and territories. We've also identified 3 questions related to the challenges that might be created by a state or a territory attempting to develop their statewide programs and events. So I'm going to jump in. We will spend the vast majority of our remaining time listening to our panelists, hopefully fielding some questions from our attendees. Our first question, and I'm going to call on some panelists as we go through these questions. And so, Cassandra, I'm going to pick you out first and address the following question. What do you see as the single most significant opportunity that America 250 presents for Pennsylvania? What is the single most important thing the commission can do to help you take full advantage of that opportunity?
Thanks, Tony, and thanks for having me here today. We, as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, created America 250 PA back in 2018. We officially launched last year in 2019. And again, we were created by a piece of legislation that was introduced in a bipartisan manner that we got a lot of support from our state legislature and also our current governor, Governor Tom Wolf. And America 250 PA hopes to celebrate Pennsylvania's history while innovating Pennsylvania's future. And most importantly, while innovating our future, engaging our next generation of Pennsylvanians in doing that. And we have 4 themes. We're striving to make 2026 epic as we educate, preserve, innovate, and celebrate every Pennsylvanian in all 67 counties. So we truly are, appreciative of the partnership we have with America 250 so far. And, we hope to be able to partner on programming and initiatives and projects as the years go on. One thing that, I think every state is going to, as they're setting up their commissions, is going to find to be maybe a little bit of a struggle, but is funding. And how are we going to partner with the national organization to have the states be designated, or these commissions be designated as the official America 250 organization? How do we get that word out to corporations and partners and organizations across our states to know that this is the state portion of the national celebration? And we look to America 250 on the national side for guidance and support to do that. But again, we're honored to be able to partner and to be on this call today with colleagues from across the country, while we're all, looking to really celebrate in 2026.
Sure, and I do want to point out that Cassandra and Pennsylvania have been well ahead of the curve nationally and have really taken a leadership position in beginning to define what their state commission is going to be doing. I also want to point out, importantly, you mentioned educate as one of your 4 key themes. And what I always think about is the generation of young people who will be eligible to vote for the first time in 2026 are today 12 years old. And so what can we do over the next 6 years, right, to educate and help 12-year-olds to understand 6 years from now why they should vote? So thank you, Cassandra. Patrick from New Mexico, what do you think is the most significant opportunity? How can the National Commission help?
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Cassandra. I think you framed up a lot of what we sort of understand as the important parts of this coming commemoration. Being one of those people who remembers 1976 and the bicentennial, had an impact as a New Mexican growing up, but it also led me, even at a time as I was younger then, realizing there's some real questions we have to ask. And since then, coming back as director of New Mexico Historic Sites and working closely with our broad spectrum of communities and cultures and people that live in this state, it has a different meaning. We come from a distinctive place. We have 23 pueblos and tribes, including a large portion of the Navajo Nation. These are all sovereign countries with their own identities and a real strong emphasis on how it is that we work in conjunction with them on everything we do. We also have the legacy of the Spanish. We look back to the creation of New Mexico, if you will, when the Spanish arrived 410 years ago. So the conversation about the 250th celebration is one that requires a kind of different approach and a different conversation, and one that really has taken on even a new meaning in the last several months, I believe. That we look at how the national conversations about ethnicity, race, background, culture tie into some of these discussions. And I think it's key when we're thinking about our nation as a whole, 250 years on, what is that tapestry? What are the various narratives that come into making us as a nation? And sometimes they're not comfortable. And sometimes it isn't all sunshine. And to be able to have that conversation about how we are connected as a people, that each American, regardless of where they are, whether their ancestry has been on the land right down the road from where I've been for centuries and centuries, or whether it's somebody who's a new arrival, an immigrant to this country, how do they all play into that part? So I think our opportunities and our challenges overlap with each other. And I think how we go about bringing this layered conversation together will be really critical. And I think many of my colleagues from the West will probably share some of these very important kinds of discussions. But I think whatever it is that we do, we want to make sure that those 12-year-olds or younger, or those people who are senior citizens, will all be able to see themselves in this commemoration event.
Patrick, thank you. And one of the things I want to emphasize to reinforce a point you made, the America 250 Commission is charged with looking at these national signature programs. I mentioned 100,000 programs, hopefully at the state and local level. The National Commission cannot hope to control 100,000 programs. In fact, just the opposite. The National Commission has identified a decentralized approach. And what we hope will happen is not only will all 56 states and territories participate, but they'll do that in a highly customized way. So you mentioned some of the unique features of New Mexico, and we would hope that New Mexico's programs and events really highlight those unique features of your state and your local community. So that's a terrific point to have made. Thank you, Patrick. Next up, one of our questions about challenges. I mentioned we are going to have a decentralized national approach. What challenges might that create at the state and territory level? And I'll go first to Devin from New York.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think while the decentralized approach is certainly the way to go and a way to customize the commemoration at the state level, it also has a series of challenges. And what we're seeing in New York is we are also starting the process of talking about planning and planning itself, and bringing together these constituencies in a semi-decentralized way. I think the main issue that's going to arise is how do we connect the programs and the stories that are being told at the state level with what's happening nationally. Each state is so unique, with constituencies within the states are unique. New York is an extremely diverse state, and it really always has been, including the colonial era. So, you know, that's our challenge, is how do we tie what communities are going to be doing to commemorate the 250th and the 250 years since with kind of the statewide initiative that we're developing. So it presents a challenge, but I think, as Patrick noted, we are really looking at telling the complexity of history and engaging with communities that in the past have been silenced by commemorations, including our Native nations, which still exist in New York. So these are things that we're trying to think about as we move forward with engaging with these communities to determine, you know, what's the best path forward. And the decentralized model, as I said, presents some unique challenges.
Absolutely. And now next, if I may, I'll call on Kevin Cherry, give your thoughts on this, and then I'll address one of the items that I think Devin brought up that's very critical. Kevin, please.
Well, I'm actually a champion of the decentralized approach, but I do recognize that there are some drawbacks to the decentralized approach. But decentralization does open up more opportunities for or avenues of potential support. You know, we can depend upon one or two major streams of support, but by having lots of little streams flowing alongside of those big rivers of support, I think that makes us more resilient to any kind of economic downturn. So that's one of the main reasons that I like decentralization, in addition to what's already been stated about being able to fit local models, encouraging grassroots support. But that having been said, decentralization does have a few downsides, and one of them is you run the risk of lacking a focus to your overall programming. And I think that we want to have programming, not just for programming's sake, but programming that leads to some sort of outcome, some kind of change in the people who participate, the institutions that participate. And if you don't have some kind of a focus to your programming, underneath an overall umbrella, even as diverse as the programming we all want to see, if it can't be tied to some centralized major themes, and I think that may be a role for the National Commission working with us to come up with that big umbrella so that we can shoehorn or fit in our different types of programming. And by programming, I mean everything from speakers to preservation efforts to whatever, that it helps us lead to actually having an outcome, to come up with some goals for this commemoration to mean something after it's over in 2031 or whenever some of the states are going to finish its commemoration. There's also another downside to decentralization in that it might, by us not being focused, it might hamper our efforts at seeking long-term, ongoing support. So without the euphemism, it'd be great to have federal funding for these kind of activities going forward, and the 250th inspire that funding. But if we're all pulling our wagons in different directions, that usually doesn't help get funding. You all have to be organized and have the same ask. So we do have to be organized in that. We can't be decentralized in our ask. That might be another place for someone, some institution to come together and pull all of us together and say, okay, we've heard everybody. What do you think about this? Give us their feedback. This isn't going to meet what everybody wants, but it'll help most of us. And finally, I think our last challenge from decentralization might be that it may lead to a perceived, and I mean a perceived competition between participating institutions and organizations at the expense of true collaboration. Now, I think that the likelihood of that in any grand scale is not great, but I also think that the likelihood in little ways it's going to happen, and we have to be prepared to address it when it happens, understand it, accept it, and keep our eye on the big picture and the big goals, because I do, once again, believe that decentralization is the way to go, because the commemoration in Hawaii, aloha, Stacy, I haven't seen you in a long time, is going to be different from the commemoration in North Carolina, and it should be, because our people have different needs, our places have different needs, and not only that, the commemoration in Charlotte, North Carolina, will not look the same as it will look in Edenton, North Carolina. And I think that that is a plus, a positive.
Kevin, what you just described is in fact the hope, the aspiration of this whole thing, that what's done, particularly at the local level, will really resonate for people at the local level, because that's how people will most engage in this thing. And frankly, remember it, 25, 30 years from now. It's amazing to me whenever we've mentioned the bicentennial in any of our listening sessions, people immediately remember something, if they're old enough to have been part of that. And by the way, probably the most frequently mentioned one is, oh yeah, the tall ships. I remember Chesapeake Bay and the tall ships. People really remember some of the events around America 200, if you will. And we're hoping for America 250 to do the same.
Well, Tony,
please.
Tony, you had your tall ships, but I was a fourth grader in the Denver, North Carolina bicentennial pageant, and I'll hold our bicentennial pageant up to those tall ships any day.
I love it. I love it. That's great. But you've dated yourself, Kevin. One of the things that Devin mentioned was to include voices. That a goal here is that we cannot silence important voices in this whole process. And I just want to emphasize one of the things we have heard, the survey we did with over 5,000 Americans, the over 140 focus groups we've already conducted, is people have been very forthcoming about saying, look, you cannot have a celebration of America 250 without also acknowledging those periods in our history where we have failed to live up to our core values. And I can assure you all who are on this call that the commission is very aware of the fact that we need to be very forthright about those periods in our time when we have not lived up to our core values. So that was a very important point you mentioned, Devin, in your comments. Next up, an opportunity question. Some of you have obviously in your past roles been involved in commemorations and celebrations in your state or territories. Can a couple of you share any experiences you've had in your respective state or territory that you've learned about doing? What's the key to a successful celebration or commemoration? And Randall, if we have you on audio, can I ask you to jump in about West Virginia?
I'm here. How are you?
We're doing well, thank you.
Okay. I thought about this because we just had our 150th anniversary 7 years ago. And we started, well, first of all, my name is Randall Reed-Smith, and I sit on the governor's cabinet as his curator for the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History. It's a comprehensive agency. We all get to work together on great projects. And the biggest success that came out of our Semiquincentennial is that we started educational opportunities for our West Virginia students to build pride in who we are as West Virginia. We do a thing in West Virginia where all 8th grade students take West Virginia history. They compete for the West Virginia Golden Horseshoe. It's only 1% of the 8th grade class that gets that. What we did from that, we created a West Virginia State History Bowl, give away $10,000 to 14-year-olds to, help promote West Virginia. That started in 2010. We're in our 10th year. It's like one of the biggest things we have going in the state to, follow our mission, which the mission of the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History is to identify, preserve, protect, promote, and present the ideas, arts, and artifacts of West Virginia's heritage, building pride in our past accomplishments and confidence in our future. And that's what we've seen by these kids, because then at the Semiquincentennial, we started an ambassadors camp, brought 2 kids from all 55 counties, took them to college for a week in the University of Charleston, and they helped create programs that are interesting for them through our agency. So what we did was create better education opportunities that they still do today. And we work with the Department of Education. We will again to, have wonderful projects. We are working on a legacy project that West Virginia students will write about their history. And I think we have the most unique opportunity because when this country was formed, we were not a state. So we're looking to do a huge project on West Virginia when we were Virginia, to work with all of our students and our teachers and Department of Education. The Semiquincentennial was a great success. We meet every Monday, a group of us. We don't have a commission yet. That has to happen in the legislative session, but we've got education, commerce, arts. Through us, we are arts, archives. I'm the State Historic Preservation Officer. We have all public broadcasting. We have all libraries, and we have volunteer services. We work at all the courthouses. So we have the opportunity to connect everything up. And so what was the biggest success for us from our 150th, our Semiquincentennial, was to create opportunities to build pride in who we are as West Virginians and how we contribute to our great country. Was that 2 minutes?
That was perfect, even if it went over 2 minutes. But
well, I timed it and it wasn't, so there.
What I loved about the History Bowl idea is it wasn't just a one and done. You've now.
Oh no! And here's the thing. I mean, we started the first time with like 18 teams. We probably have 400 to 500 teams now. It's a team of 4 for 8th graders, and these like this year we had to cancel the finals. We did all the regionals. Take the top 2 from each region, which is 16, and if you don't make the top 2, you get to go do a play-ins, like like they do at sweeps in Miss West Virginia. If you're not Miss Clarksburg, you can go and we take the top 8. So we have 24 teams that compete, and that History Bowl is coveted. I mean, we have huge rivalries in the state, and the kids are learning about what's great about being a West Virginian, and they're teaching their parents, or at least reminding them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've got it going, and I'm going to stick with you as long as I can, but I got to go work. I'm up in the mountains of West Virginia. And if y'all have my information, call, I'll help you do anything you need to do. I got to keep up with Pennsylvania.
You got it. Thanks, Randall.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan from Massachusetts, can you share some of your experiences on commemorations?
Sure, although I just want to touch on Randall's comment about keeping up with Pennsylvania. Don't we all have to keep up with Pennsylvania?
Well, no, not really. I was just being polite.
So I have to say, so Revolution 250, which is the organization that I head, is a consortium of more than 62 organizations that are nonprofit, for-profit, government agencies that are all working together to build awareness and programming around the coming 250th. We've been doing programs since 2015. In August of 2015, we hosted our first major public event, which was the Stamp Act protests and really the formation of the Sons of Liberty. And since then, we've continued on with both large-scale programs. We did the landing of the British troops in 2018. We've done the Boston Massacre just this past March, but also working on education and preservation efforts as well. Really focused the education. We've been working with Massachusetts Council for the Social Studies and the National Council for the Social Studies on building awareness of underrepresented voices in the American Revolution. For a lot of people in Massachusetts, they don't realize the number of foreign prisoners of war we held during this time period, the role of both free and enslaved Africans in Massachusetts revolutionary history, and other foreign nationals who helped support the Patriot cause by building fortifications, training militia soldiers, etc. So there's a lot of great work that's being done on the education side of things as well. And for us in Massachusetts, the very thing that started all this trouble 250 years ago is the very thing that we're still continuing to work with and turn it into a strength, which is that our communities are pretty self-reliant and self-sufficient and jealous of their prerogatives within their own communities. So it does require going out to these communities, bringing them all together. We've been hosting regional musters within the state, sort of as we're doing now, where we get organizations to come to a place that is central to them in their region and listen to them and try and get an understanding of what they want out of the 250th, because I'm old enough to remember the bicentennial. I certainly remember what my hometown in Massachusetts did. And if you go back and you look at what was promoted by the Bicentennial Committee of Massachusetts back then, it wasn't necessarily related to the American Revolution, but it was really built around civic pride, civic responsibility, and civic education. And we're looking to continue some of those same themes, updating it for the 50 years that have passed. And in preservation, I just want to touch on one thing too, in sort of talking about bringing communities together. The Massachusetts Historical Society, which is the leader of the Revolution 250 consortium, was founded to preserve the records that came about through the strife of the 1760s, 1770s, and so on. But every town in Massachusetts has records that deal specifically with what went on 250 years ago. And it's not just about the citizens who went off to fight. It is very often about the citizens who stayed home, the free, the enslaved, the transient peoples who were living and working in those communities. And so making sure we find ways to help those communities preserve those records and to make them available for future generations, and to educate the students within those communities about what's available in their town to help them understand the role of their community, not just in this history, but in the history that's occurred in the last 250 years.
That's great. And to all the attendees, it's becoming pretty obvious to me from the early comments of our panelists that educate and education seemed to be a consistent theme running through a lot of your comments. So, Jonathan, thank you very much for that. We're going to go to our second question regarding challenges. What do you think might be obstacles to establishing an official America 250 commission or organization in your state, and how can those be overcome? Can I go to Jamie in Wyoming and ask you for your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, team. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think one of our biggest obstacles right now is to find and lock in our key decision makers, both on the state and local community level. We need our public and private champions to come forward. We need to put them on committees or informal groups even, just to get them talking and thinking about ideas. We are a few years away from some of the celebrations, the major ones anyway. But if we don't start that planning now, there really is no way to lock in some of that government funding that may be available, or to start looking for really good private partnerships that we can start small and grow as we near the big celebrations. Some of the things that happened in Wyoming over the bicentennial took years and years to put together. And you just can't start soon enough when it comes to funding. So finding those champions now and really get that conversation started on the local level so that we're ready when the time comes.
Excellent, Jamie. And one of the things your states will be learning more about, we have developed, I think, a very compelling brand toolkit that we will be able to hand off to every state. And it creates a clear lockup between America 250 and your state 250 commission. We think that will help be a cohesive factor in this whole thing. That same question, what could be some obstacles to getting this going in Hawaii? Stacy?
Aloha, Tony. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be with this amazing group of people. I've been listening and agreeing and hopefully nodding my head on many of the things that have been said. And I agree with Patrick that the opportunities and the challenges are blended together. And so I was born in Pennsylvania. I was born in Pittsburgh, and I'm a former state librarian of Pennsylvania. And so I bring just a little bit of a different maybe perspective. I wasn't living outside of Philadelphia when I was a kid during the bicentennial. I remember wearing my little pilgrim's hat and celebrating. And now I've been in Hawaii for it'll be almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in the spring, and I have a little bit of a different perspective. We're one of the newest states, of course, in the United States, but also the way that the state was acquired. There is a history here that does create some challenges for people in thinking about their connection to the grand 250 history. We have people who are very patriotic. And so I think the challenge for us will be figuring out, and I take this from a librarian's perspective, is helping us tell story. Here we say talk story. So talk story about where we have been, our sense of place and why our place is important, and how we fit into the history of the United States and the amazing country that it is, and helping create those spaces for everybody to talk about where we've been, where maybe we weren't exactly what we needed to be, but we're moving forward, and where do we want to be in the future. So I think it's trying to build that opportunity for the whole story to be told, but for that whole story to be shared with everyone. And I was watching President Obama introduce Hamilton when they came to sing at the White House. And one of his quotes from that was, we're boisterous and we're diverse. We're full of energy and perpetually young in spirit. We are a project that never ends. We make mistakes, we have our foibles, but ultimately when everyone's voice is heard, we overcome them. And I think from Hawaii, we want our voice to be heard. Not a lot of people really understand Hawaii. They think about surfing and maybe Waikiki, but there's a rich tradition of language and culture and history and art that I think this will give us an opportunity to share those things. So I think it's about the challenge will be creating that opportunity for that whole story and a way to tell that story.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. Next is our third opportunity question. And it's all about this idea of a legacy. So how do you imagine America 250 in your state or territory can leave a legacy that extends well beyond 2026? And if I may, can I turn to David in Idaho to tackle that one?
Thank you, Tony. I just kind of want to reiterate my thanks for being part of this. And I have to say, everybody here is speaking my language. It is so inspiring to hear about the thoughts and the ideas of making sure that all voices are included. And I think here in Idaho, you know, we're a Western state, like some of my fellow colleagues. We became a state in 1890, a territory in 1863. It's really going to be an opportunity for us to strengthen partnerships that we already have by bringing in groups that we may not have worked with, you know, to make sure that everybody is included as part of that discussion. One of the things that we'll be doing here at the Idaho Humanities Council is we'll be working with the Smithsonian Institution to bring in a traveling exhibit through their Museum on Main Street program called Voices and Votes. And that will travel to several Idaho communities kind of leading up to 2026. And that program is also really capacity building for the local communities. So it also kind of leaves that legacy there. I think it's also important to note that Idaho being one of the fastest growing states in the nation, we have a lot of new people moving to our state. And this will provide us an opportunity to work with them and, you know, make sure their voices are included. We have a lot of different perspectives. You know, I came here from Oklahoma 3 years ago. And so Oklahoma's experience is very different than Idaho's. And I think that the legacy that America 250 will provide us here in the state is just making sure that we have the opportunity to make sure that every voice is heard in a respectful way. I think that once we kind of move beyond that, and we've touched upon some of these really uncomfortable issues that Patrick so eloquently stated, that we'll be able to find common ground. And that is desperately needed right now. And we'll be able to move forward on all sorts of issues.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Let me come back to Devin in New York. Your thoughts about how do you leave a legacy beyond 2026?
Yeah, well, I concur with David, but also I think there's an opportunity here, if done correctly, to really broaden the reach of history and get people interested in history again. What we saw after the bicentennial in New York, and I'm sure in other states, was kind of this this interest that exploded as a result of the bicentennial. So we saw the formation of several historical societies, local historical societies, museums, things like that. You know, in the last probably 10, 15 years, and certainly now with the pandemic and museums having to close for such a long time, these organizations are struggling. And I see this, the 250th, as an opportunity to educate the population and the students for sure about the history of New York and the country, but also to educate the community again about what resources exist as far as historic sites, museums, the rich tapestry of history that we have in the state and in the country, and get people engaged with those organizations once again. So that's I see that as a real opportunity, and I'm very hopeful that the work that we're all doing in our own states and at the national level will help to elevate history once again and get get people engaged with their own local history.
That's great. And I do think the educate and engage themes are how this leaves the best legacy out there. Our last question regarding challenges. How do you see America 250 contributing to increased community engagement and unity in your state? And can I turn to Tamara in California?
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. As many of my fellow panelists have noted, America 250 provides us all with the opportunity to better understand our history and the democratic process. So though California wasn't one of the original 13 states, America 250 will provide us with the opportunity to look at the role of California in the Union and to celebrate the things that we're proud of and learn from our more painful or complex parts of our history. From our bilingual 1849 Constitution to voting rights to environmental preservation and technology innovation, California has a very unique and diverse story. But like many of the other states, only parts of it are widely known. I know we're known for Yosemite and for Hollywood and for Silicon Valley and things, all of which are very important, but we want to make sure that parts of the lesser known components of our story are known as well. So we're going to use America 250 really as an opportunity to share more of California's story, US history, and to promote diversity and inclusion as we reflect on our past and move forward toward a more productive and innovative future, which everyone feels a part of. We want to highlight our history, identity, and unique contributions to the US as we work to deepen our community's understanding of our history, as well as what 1776 meant to the area that is California today. So we want to answer questions like who was civically empowered at that time and how has California evolved in its 170-year history. And we're also looking at ways to increase community engagement through civic and historic education, online resources, multimedia options, and public events. And though these are still in development, we're planning to develop out opportunities like community involvement or volunteerism, sort of like a call to action, educational initiatives related to the democratic process and voting, as well as events that highlight California's role in the union and unique identity. We're also planning to get public feedback as we develop up these events, and we're looking at partnering with public, private, and nonprofit partners throughout this community engagement, and really looking to make it an inclusive and diverse experience with different types of events catering to the different areas of our state. We're also looking to engage with Californians of all ages, like many of you are, as we work with all of California's 58 counties and with our tribal governments. We want to include Californians in this effort as we document their histories. So as we do efforts like community oral history projects or asking people to record what it's like to live in California today, which I think will help to contribute to future commemorative efforts for us as a nation. And we also want to make sure that we're really reaching out and working with individuals who haven't been documented in our history before. California has one of the largest state archives in the United States, but it largely documents California's government history. So we want to make sure that as a part of this effort, we're really making sure that our archives and our story includes all of the components that maybe haven't been as well documented. And we want to make sure that we're also working with other historical institutions throughout the state who may have some of the older historic records, whether they're missions or museums or other private groups, and that we're working with them to provide expertise or additional funding opportunities to help preserve their historical records so they are available for future scholars or for students or for people to learn more about their story. And as a part of this, we're also really excited to learn more about the national signature and federal efforts. And we're also looking to work with many of you and a lot of our state neighbors to see how we can potentially partner together on some of these initiatives, whether they're through tourism or promoting economic opportunities or really developing out engaging programs maybe that cross state lines too. And we want to empower all Californians during these commemoration activities so they feel like they're part of the story, and this is something that they want their kids to participate in now or something that they'll share with them in the future.
Great, and you've actually anticipated, Tamara, one of the questions that we got from one of the attendees, Gabrielle, who was interested to know how are we going to engage NGOs, either nationally and or in states. And then on the flip side, how are we going to engage federal agencies? Cassandra, can I ask you in Pennsylvania to talk about how you hope to engage NGOs in your state?
So we have been trying to, especially everyone has to take into consideration with this year with COVID, and it's been tough to travel, as all of you I'm sure are in the same boat. So we've been really trying to get awareness and our story out via email blasts, via social media, just more, again, an awareness that we do exist. And I think, piggybacking on the comment about an obstacle, that's part of an obstacle here is how do we tell the story and create the awareness around America 250 PA, which ultimately then provides awareness for America 250, because what we find is, folks just don't know that we exist yet. And then, some of the pushback is, well, it's 6 years away, come see us in, 2 or 3, not realizing that if we want to truly have impact on communities across our Commonwealth or do infrastructure projects, that takes 5 to 6 years to have that impact. So again, we are trying to let folks know we're here. Our contact information either is on the bio sheet, or you can visit our website at america250pa.org and reach out to us if you're in the Commonwealth and you want to be part of this celebration. We want to have you at the table with us. And we're just going to continue to try to tell our story, raise the awareness, and again, strive to truly have an impact on these communities across the Commonwealth.
Terrific. Thank you, Cassandra. 2 other questions that came up, and I'll be brief because we are committed to adjourning right at 5 o'clock. One of the questions also from Gabrielle was, how do we intend to get federal agencies involved? There are actually 11 ex officio federal agencies that are on the commission, and we are having routine meetings and program planning events with them. The National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the State Department, et cetera. So that coordination began about a year ago, and each of those agencies have already put together a preliminary plan of action. The second question we got from Susan related to tribal nations. And I can tell you that we, again, are already in conversations with many representatives of tribal nations to determine whether those are going to be individual efforts, whether there's any opportunity for some of the Native American sovereign nations to do things together. So I did want to thank our attendees for those questions, and hopefully that briefly addresses it. Ash, if we could go to the final slide. What's next? Not just from this call, and I want to thank our panelists, obviously, but all the other ways we're trying to gain input. Believe me, this is really helping to shape the America 250 national events and help us to engage people. We encourage you, Cassandra said it best, we too at the national level, when we approach some organizations, are saying, that's 6 years away, don't bother me. 6 years is going to go by in a heartbeat to try and get meaningful things done. And lastly, we do want any additional feedback any of you might have. You can go to listen@america250.org and provide any more input. And obviously our main website, America 250, if you'd like to learn more and begin to ask about how you can engage with the national organization on your efforts. So with that, we are at 5 o'clock straight up Eastern time. I want to thank our panelists again and for all of our attendees. Be well, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.